There was a time when beauty didn't need exaggeration to make an impact. It didn't rely on screens, extreme aerodynamics, or outrageous numbers to get attention. In the 1960s, some American cars achieved something far more difficult. They made the world turn its head in silence. It was an unrepeatable decade, an era when design reached an almost perfect balance between elegance, presence, and power. While some manufacturers leaned into restrained luxury and visual authority, others began hinting at something new. Machines that not only looked good, but projected character, even while standing still. Today, when we look back, it's easy to remember the most famous muscle cars or the big luxury sedans. But the real question is different. What if some of the most beautiful American cars of the 1960s aren't the ones everyone mentions first? In this video, we're going to explore a very special selection, not just the most popular, but the ones that best captured the spirit of a decade where style, confidence, and presence meant everything. And trust me, what comes next shows exactly why the 1960s are still, for many, the golden age of the American automobile. Let's begin. 1963, Buick Riviera. If there was a car in the 1960s that understood elegance without exaggeration, it was this one. When the Riviera debuted in 1963, it didn't seem to follow the same script as the rest of Detroit. While many manufacturers were still playing with tail fins, heavy chrome, and proportions inherited from the 1950s, Buick presented something far more restrained and far more self-assured. Its silhouette was low, clean, and perfectly balanced. The long hood, short rear deck, and nearly straight body side created a presence that didn't depend on ornamentation to feel special. It was a car that didn't ask for attention, it naturally attracted it. What's most interesting is that the Riviera didn't feel like a traditional large American coupe. There was an almost European influence in its approach, taut surfaces, carefully judged proportions, and a surprisingly restrained use of chrome for the era. Everything felt intentional, nothing felt excessive. Inside, the philosophy continued. This wasn't the typical rolling living room, designed only to impress passengers. The cabin felt more focused, more personal, almost driver-oriented. Quality materials, clear instrumentation, and an atmosphere that communicated luxury, but with its own identity. And once the Riviera was in motion, it became clear it wasn't just a pretty face. In its most representative versions, it carried the powerful 425 cubic inch nailhead Phi-8, delivering up to 360 horsepower. Very serious numbers for the early 1960s, especially in a car that behaved with such composure on the road. This wasn't nervous or dramatic power. It was firm, continuous, deeply refined thrust. And that's the key to its appeal even today. It didn't try to be the most aggressive, it didn't try to be the most ostentatious. It tried to be the most balanced, and it succeeded. Today, a well-preserved 1963 Buick Riviera typically ranges between $45,000 and $85,000, with exceptional examples exceeding that. It's not just a beautiful classic, it's one of the most respected American designs of the entire decade. And the most interesting part is that, as we move forward on this list, the idea of American beauty is about to take very different shapes. 1963 to 1964, Cadillac Series 62. There was a very specific moment in the 1960s when Cadillac found the perfect balance. And this car is proof. Before the brand gave in to the visual excess that would dominate the end of the decade, the Series 62 Coupe de Ville represented a form of luxury that was far more self-confident. It didn't need oversized fins or excessive chrome to command respect. Its presence was enough. The silhouette is pure, well-executed American proportion. Long hood, low, clean roofline. A straight body side that communicates stability even at a standstill. Everything in its design feels measured to convey status effortlessly. It doesn't try to grab attention aggressively, but it's impossible to ignore when it appears. Inside, the experience was exactly where Cadillac wanted it. Absolute isolation and comfort. Wide seats, high-quality materials, and an atmosphere designed to eliminate outside noise. This wasn't a car meant to be driven in a hurry. It was meant to glide down the road with quiet confidence. And interestingly, that calm didn't mean a lack of capability. In its most representative versions, it carried the refined 390 cubic inch V8, producing around 325 horsepower, more than respectable for a large luxury coupe in the early 1960s. But true to its character, the power wasn't delivered with drama. It arrived smoothly, steadily, almost inevitably. And that's what makes this Cadillac especially interesting within the decade. It wasn't the most radical, it wasn't the most flashy, but it understood something many others forgot. True luxury doesn't need to raise its voice. Today, a well-preserved Series 62 Coupe de Ville typically ranges between $50,000 and $90,000 depending on condition and originality, a range that perfectly reflects what it represents today. One of the most balanced and elegant Cadillacs of the classic era. And as we move forward, the definition of American beauty is about to become far more aggressive. 1966, Pontiac GTO. And this is where the tone begins to shift. Because up to now, we've talked about elegance, presence, and well-contained luxury. The GTO arrives to introduce something new into the conversation: attitude. When Pontiac launched this machine in the mid-1960s, the goal wasn't to create the most refined car on the road, nor the quietest. The objective was much simpler and much more dangerous: to make a relatively compact coupe feel impossible to ignore. Visually, the 1966 GTO is one of the best proportioned muscle cars of the entire decade. The body keeps clean, muscular lines without yet falling into the excess that would come later. The front end has real presence, the stance is low and planted, and the whole package communicates energy even when completely still. What's interesting is that, unlike many later muscle cars, there is still elegance in the formula here. It isn't crude or overdone. It's aggressive, but controlled. Pontiac found a very difficult balance between muscle and style, and that's exactly why this model has aged so well. Inside, the atmosphere is no longer that of a large luxury coupe. Everything feels more driver-focused. Bucket seats, clear instrumentation, and a driving position that invites something very different from simply gliding down the highway. It invites you to drive, and when this Pontiac gets moving, it becomes very clear why it changed the rules of the game. In its most representative configuration, the 389 cubic inch V8 could deliver up to 360 horsepower. In a car of this size and weight, that figure wasn't just respectable, it was transformative. Acceleration felt immediate, the thrust was forceful, and for the first time on this list, the word fast started to take on a much more serious meaning. That's the key to its beauty. It wasn't just how it looked, it was what it promised when you pressed the accelerator. Today, a well-preserved 1966 GTO typically ranges between $55,000 and $95,000, with especially well-kept examples exceeding that. A clear reflection of its historical importance, and how well its design has aged. Now, I want your opinion. Between the three we've seen so far, the elegance of the Buick, the authority of the Cadillac, or the attitude of the GTO, which one would you choose? Tell me in the comments, because what comes next raises the intensity even further. 1969, Dodge Charger RT. Now we enter serious territory, because if the GTO hinted that American beauty could be aggressive, the Charger makes it unmistakably clear from the very first glance. By the late 1960s, Dodge understood something very few manufacturers had fully balanced up to that point. A car could look threatening without losing elegance. And this machine is exactly that. Pure tension wrapped in steel. The fastback silhouette is the key to everything. Long, low, with a roofline that flows continuously into the rear. There are no unnecessary visual interruptions, no decorative excess. Everything is designed to create a dominant presence even when the car is completely still. It's one of those designs that looks like it's moving, even when parked. The hidden front grille adds another layer of character. It's not flashy in the traditional luxury sense. It's colder, more calculated. This Dodge isn't trying to please, it's trying to impose. Inside, the environment follows the same philosophy. This isn't the rolling living room of a Cadillac or the softness of a Buick. Everything feels more driver-focused, firmer, more direct. The seating position and instrumentation reinforce the idea that this car was built for more than just highway cruising, and when pushed for real, it delivers like few others on this list. In its most representative R/T form, it could be equipped with the massive 440 cubic inch V8, producing around 375 horsepower. In 1969, that firmly placed this coupe in very different territory from the large luxury cars we saw earlier. Power delivery was heavy, forceful, and continuous, not nervous, dominant. And that's the secret to its appeal even today. It wasn't delicate, it wasn't discreet, it was American beauty in its most intimidating form. Today, a well-preserved 1969 Charger RT typically ranges between $90,000 and $150,000, with exceptional examples climbing far beyond that, a direct reflection of what it represents. One of the most iconic and desirable designs of the muscle era, 1964. Ford Thunderbird. After the tension of the Charger, the tone changes completely. Because this car wasn't designed to intimidate, it was designed to seduce. By the mid-1960s, Ford understood there was a very specific space between the large luxury coupes and the emerging muscle cars. A place for buyers who wanted style, presence, and comfort, but without the mechanical aggression that was beginning to dominate the decade. And this model fit that space perfectly. Visually, it's one of the most refined designs of its generation. The body is long and flowing, but without heaviness. The roofline falls elegantly, the front end is clean, and the overall presence communicates modern luxury that clearly separated it from traditional full-size sedans. It doesn't try to look fast, it doesn't try to look aggressive, it tries to look important, and it succeeds. The concept here was clear: a personal luxury car built to cover long distances in style and complete serenity. Inside, that philosophy becomes obvious immediately. Wide seats, carefully designed instrumentation, and an enveloping atmosphere that feels more intimate than most full-size coupes. This was a car to enjoy the journey, not dominate it. But that doesn't mean it lacked capability when the road opened up. In its most representative versions, it carried Ford's 390 cubic inch V8, producing around 300 horsepower. More than enough to move the body with ease and maintain highway speeds with almost effortless confidence. Acceleration wasn't violent or dramatic. It was smooth, progressive, and perfectly aligned with its refined character. That's the key to its charm. This Thunderbird wasn't trying to be the fastest car on the road. It was trying to be the most elegant, effortlessly. Today, a well-preserved 1964 Thunderbird typically ranges between $35,000 and $70,000, depending on condition and originality, making it one of the most interesting entry points into 1960s American luxury. And what comes next brings us back to a name almost everyone recognizes. 1967 Chevrolet Impala Sport Coupe. And now we return to a name that almost everyone recognizes, but one that isn't always appreciated the way it deserves. Because the late 1960s Impala wasn't just a popular car. At its best, it was one of the cleanest and most balanced designs Chevrolet ever put on the road. A car that didn't need extravagance to feel completely American. The key is in the proportions. The body is long and low, with a smooth fastback roofline that flows uninterrupted into the rear. There's no unnecessary drama, no forced gestures. Everything feels resolved with a natural confidence that many later designs tried to imitate, without fully succeeding. This model perfectly represents the midpoint of the decade. It still retains classic elegance, but it already hints at the firmer, more confident stance that would dominate the late 60s. In many ways, it's the perfect balance between presence and accessibility. And once it got moving, it proved it wasn't just a familiar face. In its most representative configurations, it could be equipped with V8 engines producing well over 300 horsepower. Very respectable figures for a large coupe of its size. Power delivery was smooth but decisive, ideal for long open highways where this Chevrolet felt completely at home. And that's its true merit. It wasn't the most exclusive. It wasn't the most radical. But it was one of the cars that best captured the American spirit of its time. Today, a well-preserved 1967 Impala Sport Coupe typically ranges between $30,000 and $60,000, with especially clean examples exceeding that. Now, I want your opinion. If you had to choose between the refined elegance of the Thunderbird or the classic presence of the Impala, which one would you pick? Tell me in the comments, because what comes next completely breaks away from everything we've seen so far. 1963, Studebaker Avanti. This is what happens when a manufacturer stops looking at the past and jumps straight into the future. In the early 1960s, while most of Detroit was still refining chrome, traditional proportions, and predictable silhouettes, Studebaker did something far riskier. It introduced a car that looked like it came from another decade. The Avanti looks like nothing else on this list. Its clean front end, with no traditional grille, immediately made it clear this car wasn't trying to follow trends. The body was low, aerodynamic, and surprisingly European in its approach. Surfaces flowed smoothly without unnecessary ornamentation, creating a presence that still looks modern even today. For many buyers at the time, it was simply too different, but that's exactly where its appeal comes from today. This model didn't try to reassure drivers with conventional luxury. It tried to provoke. Every angle of the design suggests engineers and designers who wanted to get ahead of the market, even if the market wasn't ready. Inside, the experience followed the same philosophy. The cabin felt tighter and more focused than most large American coupes. Everything was oriented toward the driver, with a sportier seating position and an atmosphere that prioritized the driving experience over simple isolation. And when this Studebaker revealed what it had under the hood, the surprise was even greater. In its most notable versions, it carried a supercharged 289 cubic inch V8, producing up to 290 horsepower. Very serious numbers for a car of its size in 1963, and enough to place it among the quicker American cars of its time. Acceleration was firm, direct, and very different from the smooth delivery of the large luxury coupes that dominated the era. And that contradiction is what makes it so special. It looked like the future. It moved with real intent, but it arrived in a market that wasn't fully ready. Today, a well-preserved Avanti typically ranges between $45,000 and $85,000, with exceptional examples exceeding that. It's not the most obvious classic of the decade, but it is one of the most respected by those who truly understand the era. 1968, Oldsmobile Toronado. If the Avanti was ahead of its time in design, this Oldsmobile was ahead of its time in engineering. By the late 1960s, while most large American coupes still followed a fairly predictable formula, Oldsmobile decided to do something few expected in a car of this size and category. It didn't try to grab attention through visual extravagance. It bet on something far more interesting: real innovation. Visually, the Toronado already projected a different personality from the start. The low, wide front end, pronounced wheel arches, and clean body sides created a powerful presence, but one distinct from traditional muscle cars. It didn't look nervous or aggressive. It looked solid, almost technical. It was a design that felt modern without needing exaggeration. But the truly revolutionary part was beneath the surface. This model was one of the first modern American production cars to feature front-wheel drive, something extremely unusual in a large luxury coupe in 1968. That decision didn't just change the car's engineering, it completely altered the way it behaved on the road. And yet, Oldsmobile didn't sacrifice the muscle the market expected. In its most representative versions, it carried the massive 455 cubic inch Rocket 5.8, producing around 375 horsepower. An impressive figure for a front-wheel drive coupe in the late 1960s. Power delivery was strong, continuous, and surprisingly controlled for something so unconventional in its layout. And that's what makes the Toronado so fascinating today. It didn't just look different, it didn't just feel different. It worked in a way almost no one else was offering at the time. Today, a well-preserved 1968 Toronado typically ranges between $30,000 and $60,000. Numbers that still make it one of the most accessible major innovators of the decade. And as we approach the end of this list, American beauty is about to become much more direct. 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner. And this is where the conversation becomes much more direct, because while some cars of the 1960s tried to balance luxury, elegance, and performance, the Roadrunner was born with a much simpler and much more honest mission: go fast, and look the part. By the end of the decade, Plymouth understood something that would reshape the market. Not everyone wanted a sophisticated coupe. There was a huge audience looking for real muscle, aggressive presence, and an unfiltered driving experience. And this model was the perfect answer. Visually, it doesn't try to be delicate. The body is muscular, compact, and firmly planted on the pavement. The front end communicates immediate intent, while the sidelines carry that signature late 60s muscle car tension. There are no unnecessary decorations, no superficial luxury. Everything about this car says one thing: purpose. And yet, what's interesting is how well the design has aged. Where other cars of the era can feel overdone, the Roadrunner maintains a visual cleanliness that keeps it attractive even today. And when it came to performance, the message was fully confirmed. In its most representative configuration, the 1969 Roadrunner could be equipped with the legendary 440 cubic inch V8, producing around 375 horsepower. It wasn't the most luxurious, it wasn't the most refined, but it offered something the market was beginning to value enormously: real muscle without pretense. Today, a well-preserved 1969 Roadrunner typically ranges between $70,000 and $120,000, with especially well-documented examples exceeding that. And to close this journey, we're left with a name that helped define an entire generation: 1969 Chevrolet Camaro RS. And we arrive at the end of this list with one of the most recognizable names of the entire decade. Because if there is a car that successfully combined proportion, aggression, and mass appeal without losing design coherence, it was this one. By the late 1960s, Chevrolet fully understood what buyers were looking for: a coupe that looked fast even when standing still. And the 1969 Camaro RS captured that idea with almost surgical precision. The body is compact, but visually very well planted. The hidden headlight front end gives it a clean, focused expression, while the sidelines maintain just enough tension to keep the car looking athletic without becoming excessive. It's not a heavy design, it's a sharp one. Everything here communicates intent. The long hood, rear set cabin, and low stance create a silhouette that feels ready to move at any moment. Unlike the large luxury coupes we saw earlier, this Chevrolet represents the point where American beauty fully merges with muscle car culture. And when it came to performance, this model didn't fall short either. In its most representative configurations, it could be equipped with V8 engines easily exceeding 300 horsepower, more than enough to make it a very serious machine by late 1960s standards. Throttle response was quick, the thrust convincing, and the driving feel far more alive than the large luxury coupes of the era. And that's the reason it remains so popular today. It wasn't the most exclusive, it wasn't the most expensive, but it was one of the cars that best understood where the American automobile was heading. Today, a well-preserved 1969 Camaro RS typically ranges between $70,000 and $120,000, with especially well-restored examples exceeding that. And after reviewing all these icons of the 1960s, one thing becomes very clear. American beauty in this decade didn't have just one form. Sometimes it was quiet elegance, sometimes it was unexpected innovation, and sometimes it was pure muscle perfectly proportioned. Now, I want your opinion. Of all the cars we saw today, which one best represents true American beauty of the 1960s? Tell me in the comments. And if this journey sparked your curiosity, I recommend the video now appearing on your screen, where we explore the most beautiful American cars of the 1950s. Machines from a more innocent era, more elegant, and, for many, even more iconic. Click and continue the journey through America's automotive golden age. See you in the next video.